Thank you for staying with us. So was the governor's call a legitimate demand for accountability, or does it risk undermining confidence in the country's security architecture? What message does it send to Nigerians and the international community? How should federal and state governments handle disagreements over national security matters without sending mixed signals to the public? To discuss this and the issues arising from it, I'm joined by Elijah Onyeagba, former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, APC candidate and member Junukofa Injikoka, Junukofa Federal Constituency. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining me on Politics Tonight. Good to have you.
A very good evening to you, Jumoke.
Thanks
for having me.
I'm sure you know, you have a full grasp of what's going on already. Governor Seyi Makinde believes the UN investigation could help uncover the truth behind your state's abduction. Constitutionally, is inviting an international body to investigate an internal security incident within Nigeria the right approach?
Thank you so very much, and good evening, Nigerians. It's a bit of concern for a sitting governor, Governor Seyi Makinde, to put a call through for the United Nations or international independent investigative agencies to come in and try to unravel what happened in the course of this kidnap story that happened in Oyo State for 56 days. And to that extent, first question will be, there's a lot of questions that the call made by the governor has raised in the Federal Republic of Nigeria, because it speaks to the confidence level of, that Nigerians have in its internal security architecture, And in addition to this, he has also raised, the attention of the international community. In addition to that, there's also political tension, because that we are now in election season. Every activity, every speech at this particular point in time matters, and I think that it's important that we do not try to overheat the polity on the account of these issues. And some of these issues, that is happening in the country, especially with respect to security, is such that I believe that politics should be taken out of it, and a lot of, security agencies also need to be, careful and accountable, and, the way and manner they go about, these rescue operations. But then again, the question will be, will the UN, heed to this call by the governor of Oyo State? It's not automatic, and I must say this as a diplomat. Calling on UN agency or international human rights to come in and commence the investigation, it's totally not the way to go, because the grounds for which that can happen is whether the invitation is, if and only if the invitation is extended by the federal government of Nigeria or in the form of cooperation, but it has to come from the federal government for that investigation to happen. It can also happen if a UN body, one of the UN body, mandates itself, and brings it up in a UN meeting to say, okay, this is what needs to happen, and then obviously try to, pass through the process that is required to obtain the needed approval for that investigations to happen. These are the only two methods or the two ways where I believe that intervention, or in the form of that that investigation that is called by the governor, can happen. Mm-hmm. And to that extent, I think it has to be very clear, And if you look at it, it's, I think, 56 days that they were in captivity. And I believe that the right thing that needs to be done at this particular point in time is for us to sit down and have a review of our internal mechanism. Our internal security operations needs to find a way to review it first. Then if at the end of that review, we are unable to get the required result, or if the explanations, or if the suspect some credibility issues with the report that has been given, then that call can come. The request, in my opinion, should first of all be that a combined team of the military, the police, all of those that are responsible for this for these operations needs to be able to, come up and account for what has happened, express the various timelines that this took place. And then, of course, it's open for the public to be able to give their opinion as to what has happened. But, they call directly for the United Nations to come in and, it's sort of, I believe it's actually an extreme call. And I do not think that that's the proper thing to be done at this particular point in time.
I had this conversation with a national security expert last night, and according to him, this call is premature and should have never happened. But it was also important to look at it from the diplomatic and political angle, because, the basic question out there is, what exactly is Governor Makinde expecting the UN to uncover that Nigerian security agencies cannot? But for those who say, as the state's chief security officer, shouldn't the first account to the people of your state on what happened under his watch? If you're speaking to us tonight, Mr. Onyeagba, what responsibility should the governor personally accept in all of this?
Well, the truth is that, constitutionally, the governors are the chief security officers of their state and should actually, at every particular point in time, be in control or seem, to be in control, not even seem, they're supposed to actually be in control and constantly account for what is going on in their states. And where instances where they require any form of assistance, they should also liaise with federal government. But I understand that because there's a central command for Nigerian police, for example. The police commissioners that are working in the states are not exactly, they actually have a dotted reporting line to the governor, but they actually report directly to the Inspector General of Police. So to that extent, policing, somehow governors can, find a way to deflect, blame when these issues happen, But for me, it's not just that it's premature. I do not think that this is the right thing to do, because when there's fear of politicization of this issue, particularly the period that we are in. And when we also make this kind of call, there are also implications for the confidence level of the internal security operations. People have lost their lives. Security agents have lost their lives in this operation, these particular operations. And day by day, these things happen to our military, it happens to our internal policing, it happens to quite a lot of other, even local vigilantes lose their lives on this kind of operations. It's something I believe that, we need to tread with caution. And from a government official, I believe that, before you go to that level, there needs to be things that has to happen first. If we make this call, basically what you're saying is that you do not have confidence in Nigeria, in our internal security architecture. That's actually the meaning. And not just that, what does that say to the people, to the officers and men that risk their life on a day-to-day basis trying to do this? You're basically telling them that you've lost confidence in them, and that's the reason why you probably, there's some foul play that has happened, directly or indirectly in the course of these operations. And that's actually very worrisome. And I think that, we need to be extremely very sensitive while having this conversation, so that it doesn't actually, the politics of it does not, get out of hand and begin to cause needless tension within the country, particularly because of the period that we're in at this point in time. I think that was extreme. I think that the governor should actually ask for internal review first. And that's after that internal review takes place, and it gives everybody enough time to be able to look at that. And if we're not, not comfortable with what has happened, then we can find a way to take it further up, to other, calling other international agencies or United Nations to come into it. And the governor knows.
Let's stay on that, Ambassador. The other question would be, where is the line between demanding transparency and politicizing a security incident? When a sitting governor suggests that an abduction may be linked to his political ambition, does it carry a higher burden to present credible evidence?
Well, for me, I think that, like I said, it's actually very disappointing, to say the least. I think the presidency has responded to this. The thinking is, what has been said directly or indirectly is that, there's a declaration for presidency, he wants to run for presidency, and then something happens, and then trying to find some interconnectedness between his political ambition and the lives of people. I don't think that this is appropriate, in my opinion. I think it's extreme, and I believe that, as the chief security officer of the state, it's his responsibility to engage with agencies. He must receive security report on a daily basis. And I believe that he also needs to take some level of responsibility in all of these issues, because there has to be a clear understanding that the protection of lives and properties is your primary responsibility as the governor of a state. So if you want a military intervention, for example, in your state, you have to apply to the presidency to be able to get that approval from the commander-in-chief. If you also needed additional things to be done in trying to help you stabilize the security system, and do not forget that this is not the first abduction of students that we're having in Nigeria. It has happened over and over again, right from the time of, Goodluck Jonathan. There has been record of, abduction of school children in Nigeria. So why is it now that the United Nations will now need to come and investigate because, someone somewhere has got one political ambition or the other? I think the politics of it is a bit insensitive at this point in time. A lot has to happen, because there are implications on the confidence of the people. There are implications on the internal security framework that we have in the country, because it's basically saying that I don't trust it. It's basically a vote of no confidence on the internal security structure we have in the state from the governor of the state.
So do you think this is a matter the National Assembly should investigate independently?
Well, I do think that, National Assembly can look into it. I don't know whether they should, but they can definitely look into it. But, what I feel is that whether from legislative point of view or from the executive point of view, I think that the first thing that needs to happen at this point in time or in the wake of this call is to first of all express confidence in our institutions, because we have them and they are really, really working. Yeah, there are challenges here and there, but once we begin to throw suspicion or throw shades at our institutions, then we begin to have problems, Secondly is that I also believe that the government can also order comprehensive internal review of what has happened, and by doing that, release factual timelines from the date this happened and what the various security agencies did. Because I am quite sure and certain that when this happened, the federal government actually sent a very high-powered delegation to Oriire State to be able to meet with the government and strategize on how to address this issue. So I believe that the release of factual timelines will help us understand what happened. And it is not in all operations that there will not be issues. Security operations, I'm not an expert, but I also know that there could also be issues here and there. And those are the things that we are expected to improve on. And I also think that this point that I'm making right now is extremely very important, because we must recognize the sacrifices that are being made by our security personnel across the length and breadth of the country. This kind of call is actually not laying credence or not actually supporting the fact that we appreciate or we recognize the efforts that our men and women of the security forces are, the risks that they face on a daily basis. And having said that, it is also important that should we find lacunas, should we find gaps in the operations, those lessons are there to be improved upon. And importantly, we must avoid political, escalating these issues via political rhetorics, because this is not the time for that. Yes, another election is coming up in maybe the next 6 months or thereabout, but this is not the time to politicize, security issues. As we're talking about students, we're talking about teachers that have been away for 56 days and all. So this is not the time for that. So ultimately, my view is that federal government needs to start by showing transparency and confidence and expressing that through actions. There has to be, each of these incidences will always have reviews, and in the course of that reviews, I'm sure there will be lessons learned that can actually help us in the next level of operations that we're going into, as against, trying to call for help when there's actually no need for that at this point in time.
And for a country that is actively seeking foreign investment and projecting itself as a country with strengthening democratic institutions, I'm just worried about how such calls, these kinds of calls could implicate that narrative by suggesting that the country cannot investigate crimes without external oversight. Is there a diplomatic cost to such statements?
Well, there will be, but I actually do think that, I think there has already been a response from the the United Nations permanent rep, Nigeria's permanent rep at the United Nations, saying that this is actually, the call is outside the jurisdiction of the United Nations at this particular point in time. It's actually still within Nigeria. This is, the comment is out there, and there has also been a defense, from that end at the United Nations level. But yes, some of these some of these statements, unguarded I may call it, can also lead to challenges with foreign direct investment coming into the country, because as people actually, as investors actually want to come to Nigeria, some of this news, they obviously, want to understand what's the security architecture, what assurances or guarantees are they likely to have in all of these issues. So I believe that there could be a cost, but I think that Nigeria is responding, and they are responding in the right manner, by basically telling the UN that this is actually out of their jurisdiction at this point in time. If human rights or another UN agency, say Security Council, feels that this needs to be investigated, there's a protocol, there's a procedure for getting that done. Yes, there are diplomatic concerns, but I believe that Nigeria has responded the right way they should on the part of federal government.
All right, then let's bring it back home, Ambassador. Where should responsible political leadership draw the line between demanding accountability and making statements that could, perhaps unintentionally, weaken public confidence in the country? I mean, what would your message be to governors, to political leaders across Nigeria about balancing political commentary with national security responsibilities?
Oh, well, I think that it's important that leaders at every level understand that leadership comes with responsibility, and that responsibility is not something I believe that we should, dodge or try to just pass it on to some other persons. And there are clear constitutional provisions for every leadership position we've got in this country, whether it's executive or legislature. Even, there are clear separation of powers, without a doubt. We understand that. And in trying to even improve on these issues, constitutions are being amended by the legislative arm of government. And in trying to do this, even the executive is trying to also find a way to strengthen security apparatus in the country, or the entire architecture of the security that we have in the country. And that's why bills like, the state police and all of these issues are coming, because at this point in time, there is no argument about the fact that the nation is largely under-policed. How many are they? What is the population of a country? What is the ratio of the population of a country to the policemen that we have? There's a clear gap in that. And I believe that the federal government is actually responding in the right manner. So for every political leader, some of these issues are very, very sensitive. And you know that as a political leader, there are people that are supporting you. There are, particularly when there are, we practice a multi-party political system. Every group, every leader will have their support. And when you speak, there could be far-reaching consequences. So I believe that it's time to begin to de-escalate this tension. It's not needed at this particular point in time, because this is a security issue. Everyone has to be involved. Politics is not security. Politics cannot be mixed with security issues.
All right, then.
I believe that every leader must come together, within the confines of the Republic of Nigeria to try and address the issue of security. It is not a political issue at all.
I wanted to get your message to ordinary Nigerians. I mean, what should Nigerians take away from this debate about accountability, national unity, and confidence in our institutions? Well, sadly, we're out of time. Thank you so much for speaking with me tonight. Elijah Onyeagba, former Nigerian ambassador to Burundi, APC candidate, House of Reps, Tunukofia, Injikoka, Federal Constituency. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Please have a great evening.
Thank you so very much. God bless you, and God bless Nigeria.